Hey guys, how's it going? It's Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi December music YouTuber. I know, defeating the purpose, I know. But I thought I'd get these out towards the beginning of December as a results thing. Yes, we are doing nothing but Black Metal November. Got some of this stuff to do. As you could probably tell, I'm really behind on things. Why? I don't even know at this point. I was kind of behind on listening. Um, then I got behind on recording. So that's what's going on. But that doesn't really matter all that much. What really matters is that today I have 15 great black metal albums just for you, buddy. Yeah, just for you. So let's go into them and find the first great one. It's by Emin Muil from Italy. It's like a summoning clone. So let's see what that's about. This one's hard to pronounce because I'm not proficient in Tolkien's languages, but it is that. I know the name Turin Turambar. It's Turin Turambar Dagnir Glaurunga, which is about a guy in the Silmarillion. And the image depicts a dude stabbing a dragon. So I believe it's Glaurung is what he's referring to. The first dragon, the father of dragons. And I believe Turin Turambar was like mind control or something. I'm a Tolkien geek. I love Lord of the Rings more than anything. But that doesn't really matter that much because, you could reflect anything, but how does the quality match up? Well, it is a summoning clone, first of all. That kind of tells you what you're about to listen to. The production is a little bit more modern, a little less like misty sounding. Like there's sort of a thing about summoning that always feels kind of ethereal and weird and like esoteric and dark. Emin Muil misses that, which is a bit of its own detriment, but the real thing is that it is melodically and sonically lacking. The synth textures don't really do anything for me. The guitars are just kind of a weak tone, and melodically, it is completely vapid. There's not a single riff on this whole album. There's not a single good synth line on this whole album. It's lacking all the oomph and the atmosphere that Summoning has. So it's poor. It's extremely overrated. But fortunately, also from Italy is the band Nazgul with their first EP, if I can pronounce this one correctly. Such a tiny picture. Omne est paratum. Yeah, that's what it's called. That one's really cool. It's very militant, very riffy. There's some like electronic blast beats in here. It's really short, like not much longer than like 10 minutes, but it's exceptional stuff. It's just fast-paced, intense, militant epic black metal is like kind of the little corner they picked out, so I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's a great one. And we're going to talk about Nazgul later in this video anyway. But after that, we have something the opposite of that length. Elysian Blaze with Blood Geometry. It's sort of a funeral doom influenced black metal album here. It is over 2 hours long, and it shouldn't be. I'm always kind of worried about albums longer than an hour and 20 minutes. I'm going to think maybe it's too long, and surprise, it's too long. It has like one song that's like the final song is like approaching 30 minutes, and it just kind of revs the whole thing up again, which after having such a long and uncompromising album anyway, it's just not really an appealing element. But this album's got some strong elements. It has a ton of different ambient textures. It really dives into some different stuff. It tries to be as grand as physically possible. It tries to stuff in a whole lot here, but it's like how much of it is really successful? Not a lot of it. It's kind of cavernous in production. It doesn't riff though, which is a big no-no to me. Like I don't even care if it's like just you pick 2 chords that are really angular and it's like a suspension and you do it like a slightly off enough time. That's enough. You guys like don't realize like you don't have to work that hard for a good riff. You just have to be creative. It's really more of a smart thing, or just a learned thing, as opposed to these weak like 4-chord right on the dot melodies you got going on, which have nothing going for them. On the second hour of the album, there are some decent movements, but the first half is pretty hard to get through. There are a lot of great ideas on this album. It's just poorly executed. So if you want something with a little bit more of a funeral doom influence, I recommend this band called Starved, which their self-titled EP actually is like shockingly short, but it's got kind of the space and ambience of something almost like Have a Hedge. They're like later material, like they're more like power electronics or droney stuff. It will riff like one riff for like a song, or it'll like feel like it's barely moving. And also it's just tortured sounding. It's really in your face, really upfront, really rough production, and the imagery is crazy too. If you want a really good tasting of what this genre kind of could be doing, this feels like a really excellent sampling of that. So I wish Blood Geometry took from this one, and instead of being like, oh, I'm so sad and here's all about it, it's rather like, it's so sad and you can't even get through it because it's just so buzzy and harsh sounding and disjointed and manic that it feels like it's just zipping in and out of reality. And that's a not great description. I've had better, but it's a great EP. And then we have a band called Evil with Dream Quest. This is like a super symphonic, super progressive black metal album, and it's cheesy as heck, but I kind of love it. It's like actually extremely fun. You do not get the atmosphere of something like Satanic War Master or Mutilation. Don't expect that. And it doesn't feel as gritty as something like Dissection, which I don't care for Dissection anyways because it tries too hard to be that and it doesn't succeed. The atmosphere is lost entirely. But what you get here is like clean vocals and tons of synths and acoustic guitar, and you get like really progressive moments and movements. It's very like neoclassical in that way, but it's just fun. It's just really fun, really entertaining. There are not 5 seconds that will bore you. It just keeps going and going and going with new things to sink your teeth into. So I think that one's pretty cool. And up next is the band of the month, Windier with 1184. There's definitely a reason this is one of the more heralded Windier albums, as it's got some seriously excellent playing just in general. The gloominess and drama is a staple of any Windier project. Having action and yet a somewhat depressing vibe overall is a thing that's done really well, really well. It's really interesting. I don't see a lot of other bands doing it, but for 1184, as opposed to more of the acoustic passages that were on Arn Tour, what we get here is actually a lot more synthesizer. You get more keyboard passages, including the final track, which I would almost describe as like dance industrial, like not even electronic body music, but like, I don't know, I guess EBM is the correct term. I guess it kind of is electronic body music, but a little less metallic and a little more synth forward, which is super interesting. But you get constant riffs. They're blistering, they're fast, they're interesting. What I love are the dwelling harmonies from the rhythm guitar underneath the lead guitar, which has always been a really big element of Windier, but the harmonies here is actually something really, really nice. And a good quality about the synths, since this is such a synth-heavy album, the horn synth, which is often lauded as like one of the worst synth textures you can have, is the cleanest horn texture I've heard in any black metal, except for maybe like Reverum Im Locked, but like that's only like in contrast. Like Reverum Im Locked has like the densest, most unforgiving sound, and then having that horn texture can work because it's also kind of dense and unforgiving and it matches. But here it's very clean, very modern sounding black metal here. I could go on and on, but 1184 is a classic. It's great. You should listen to it. Windier's a really kind of untouchable band in a way. Like they're not a style I reach for constantly, but like their quality really shines through. But you know, now we're talking about something completely different. It's a new album, La Torture de Ténèbres, I believe it's called. This is their album 5, which is a bit of a comeback. You know, this band hasn't released anything in a few years. It's a one-woman project with a concept of like Metropolis, kind of like Imperial Triumphant, but instead of jazz, you get like harsh noise and drone. There are enough grounding black metal elements that tie this thing together. Apparently the other projects are a bit more black metal forward, which I have not heard, but this one has a lot of noise, a lot of industrial, a lot of heaviness, but there are blast beats, there are occasional riffs here and there that I think ties it enough into black metal. It is certainly an experimental black metal album. It's certainly pretty off the rails, pretty crazy, but I think it does accomplish the genre pretty well, which for black noise is kind of a weird thing to try to do. It's pretty repetitive, but there's this main leitmotif that shows up in seemingly the whole album that keeps the whole thing very grounded, very conceptual. It's just messed up sounding. There are these little pockets of beauty in these like incomprehensible maelstroms of hazy just death and destruction. It's really gross stuff, but the contrast is what really makes it something. It's like Blue Velvet by David Lynch. It's bizarre and off-putting, but it's really great content. I think it's a great album, and I think you should listen to it. It's one of the better blackened releases of the year. I think it's totally worth your time. And up next is an EP, Handful of Hates, Goetia Summa. Pretty cool one. A band that's kind of not known too well, and a demo that's not known too well either. It's this slightly melodic, high dynamic level of black metal. It's short at just 24 minutes long, so it's an easy listen. But the thing that comes to mind when listening to this album, as soon as you press play, is that the bass work is a real highlight, which I feel like it's a thing with Italian black metal, like, and also Greek black metal. Maybe it's just a Mediterranean thing. I feel like bands like Mortuary, Drape really show off their bass work a lot. But here, it has like these really kind of creepy little harmonies here. It can be dissonant when it wants to be. It's as busier than most bass lines, but it does exactly what it needs to be. It adds some action. And it's got some just pagan goon riffs here. Like, you get some serious, like, party black metal things going on. Like, it sounds like music you play for a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, the way the acoustic will just buzz around. But the main thing is that, like, there's not a lot of acoustic work here at all. It just is electric, but it's in like the vibe of acoustic. Like, it's played like it should be that, which is really, really cool. It's not a thing I hear very often. It's just a tiny bit spooky at points. There's like a creepy vibe on like a couple of the tracks, but for the main part, it's a really fun release with a lot of action and a little bit of drama. I think it's a great demo, one that's really kind of underrated. And up next is a band of Finnish excellence. This is Horna with, and I don't speak Finnish, en vatnags Eflos Sof Eskentavre. Something like that. And while they're hard to pronounce, they're just as hard to stomach, because Finnish black metal is some disgusting stuff. Horna is no exception. They have this insanely esoteric vibe to them. Just really weird, spiritual, witchy stuff. It feels like listening to them, you're treading on some bad territory. First of all, there's some incredibly placed dynamics for the drumming. The clarity of the cymbal types is truly exquisite for this recording quality of black metal. You can hear each different type, and it gives this extra skittering feeling that kind of aids a bit more towards the Satanic War Master or Les Legions Noir style of like vampiric black metal. And this is not that different, but while those bands tend to be a bit more on the depressing side with a little bit of triumph in something like Satanic War Master, this is like more manic stuff. There's really creepy, off-putting atmosphere, and the vocals sound just horrid. But you know what you're here for are just the beast riffs. They sound exceptional. They are utterly unrelenting, and it does kind of the Dark Throne thing where it pulls a lot of doominess, not as much as Panzerfaust, but maybe on something like Blaze in the Northern Sky would be a good comparison. And there is a ton of bottom end. It is crazy how much bottom end is on this thing, but it's not distracting at all. It just gives like the riff, and I'm not even saying from the bass guitar, I'm saying from like the regular guitar. It's just this really chunky, like almost, dare I say, like a metalcore style lower end there, and it sounds exceptional. I'm a big fan of Horna. I am excited to listen to their new album. I didn't know they dropped one this year, but I will be listening to it, and this one is great, so I hope it has a similar quality, we'll put it that way. And up next is a popular band's less popular pick, Windir with Lickferd, their final album. Rest in peace, Valfar. We miss him. I wasn't alive when he was alive, I don't think, but made some really great music, and this album is no exception. Right after the last album left off, we pick right back up with some more gloomy vibes, a little bit more mysterious quality. You get these long-form, extended, very melodic riffing, which is kind of my style stuff, something a bit more on the Swedish end. It's really interesting how so much melodicism and dynamics and speed can actually feel so gloomy and somber. Another interesting thing is the track Despot, which I would describe as Blackened Pantera. This album and the last album have their really chunky, dare I say, breakdown moments. I think they have a couple breakdowns, which was about to be the trend coming in the mid-2000s, and then eventually until the early 2010s, where I'd say straight up deathcore invaded black metal. And I'm not saying like blackened deathcore being a thing, but I'm saying like actual deathcore production and breakdowns showing up in black metal. But around the mid-2000s, we had Immortal playing their more groove metal oriented stuff. And here, I don't think it was that much different. I feel like this was probably something that influenced Immortal a lot. It is a very solid album, if a tiny bit expected. I think this is a great send-off for the band and a great album in general. Just a really good one. The vibes are fantastic. It sounds really good. I have no complaints. And then we have Aborum with No Human Intervention. This is a fusion album with industrial, and it picks up where the Norwegian scene left off with the death of Euronymous and the arrest of Varg, particularly actually after the release of Philosophem, which I will be doing a video on soon, kind of discussing the impact of albums like that. But this was the sort of weirdo wave of industrial metal coming out. And I'm not saying like Rammstein. No, we only listen to good music on this channel when I can, so I don't be listening to Rammstein that much. But what we got actually is like this slightly dance influenced, like creepy, slightly sexual vibe from the black metal scene. You know, Mayhem was doing stuff like this. Samael was doing stuff like this. There were a few other bands that like I'd have to find, but it's not my favorite style, so I really don't dive into it that often. But what I will say is Aborum here had some real heat. For those of you who don't know, this features like various different black metal musicians from Norway, including Attila, because of course he's on everything. It also features Natafrost and Faust, of all people. You get some really catchy riffs here and some more industrial style sort of start-stop riffs. It's a whole hour of just very, very unique stuff. There are pinch harmonics, amount of chunkiness that leads to breakdowns. It all kind of ends up equaling death metal if you think about it. And the riffs all have so much bottom end from the heightened production of the time. It really doesn't do it justice doing such a short review of this thing, because it's over an hour of content and it is so varied. Seriously, every song is different. Like some of them are blisteringly fast, some of them are more groovy. Some of them have, there are several like just electro-industrial interludes in here, which are admittedly like the worst part. Like they're really just used for flavor. There's not a whole ton of quality with them, but the black metal portions are fantastic, like actually really, really good to listen to. And it's interesting finding such a good exception to this sort of industrial trend of the time. I'm looking at you, Grand Declaration of War by Mayhem. What a weird album. But what we get here is really, really phenomenal. I think it's great, and you guys should check it out and kind of get your own opinion on it, because it's just so much going on. I've reviewed a few industrial tinged black metal pieces on this channel, and this one is really of its time. It's not like this more vampiric stuff I was covering last year, but it's really cool. It's a cool artifact. And up next is a re-listen, one that I had to cover again. This is Mirror Throne with Carriers of Dust, one that was actually on my intro to black metal chart like 4 years ago. I can't believe it's been going this long with this channel, but that was really my first exposure to black metal. I mean, I heard Burzum a little bit, I got into Black Gaze, and then here I am covering the black metal essentials, and I was really hyped about it, but I didn't remember much about this thing. And I can tell you right now, this thing is a real product of its time. It's a really cool album, for sure. It is definitely on the progressive side. It's borderline progressive metal here. Very clean production, but it makes me think a bit about these sort of waves of black metal and how we sort of had what I discussed earlier as a sort of third wave, a sort of industrial coming out, and then we get into the 2000s. It's sort of like, well, what happens there? And it makes me think a little bit, and I had a more definitive answer of this actually earlier today. I was talking with some buddies of mine who listen to black metal as well, and the sort of what genres were pulled to for the mid 2000s. And I was kind of thinking more thrash metal, maybe more groove metal, but maybe that's sort of like an interlude period. What this led to mainly was the deathcore influence. Mirror Throne, Carriers of Dust, you should consider almost to be like a deathcore influenced black metal album. And I'm not going to discount that. I hate deathcore. I don't like deathcore at all, which is funny because Lorna Shore made an appearance on the first year of Nothing But Black Metal in November. I don't know how that one slipped by. Maybe because of someone on Mew memeing that it was their favorite black metal album or something like that. But as opposed to the black and deathcore style of like the mid 2000s, everything was influenced by deathcore at the turn of the decade, which preluded the Black Gaze sort of thing we had going on, which I don't entirely hate. There's some of that stuff I like a lot. Some of it sucks, but some of it's great. What we get here is really clean production, heavy symphonic elements, really clicky, like progressive elements, and breakdowns, like plenty of breakdowns. Like I want to say like 5, like almost like 1 per song at least. There are also death growls everywhere. This thing is so unique. I mean, I don't know if it's entirely unique, but like it's of its time. It's really something like a corner of black metal history that like kind of needs to be looked at a bit more. It is wildly entertaining though. There are plenty of amazing riffs. It's really, really fast. It's dynamic. The vocal variety is really fun too. I think it's great. You know, I would listen to this over any deathcore album any day, and I'd listen to it over almost every metalcore album, because metalcore It's not very good either. But at least we have Mirror Throne. And up next we have Branacald with, let me try to get this right, Erdiendalir. Yep, something like that. This is a Blazebirth Hall release, which was the NSBM grouping in Russia, more Western Russia, as opposed to one of the other Russian groups out there. Russian black metal is considered kind of esoteric. So with Blazebirth Hall, the group that holds Branacald under its watch, or did anyway, I believe Wizard is the big guy behind the project. He actually died, I want to say, 6 years ago. I could be wrong, rest in peace, but not a very great guy, so not that much peace necessarily. But what they really specialized in, other than their ending period, which was more actual NSBM, they do really interesting atmospheric black metal, really snowy, like utterly frigid stuff, but not like Paysage d'Hiver. It was much simpler and in a way a little just ever so slightly cleaner. Like the riffs were more legible and more melodic. You would have one melodic riff that could stretch for 32 bars. Like seriously, a riff that takes like a good 20 seconds, maybe even longer to get through, and you would repeat that for the whole song. Some bands did this a little bit better than others, but I will say right now, every band that did this style made something excellent. Genuinely, it is my favorite style in black metal. Either this or like the Finnish scene being like super gross. But I mean, I could also kind of say like the Swedish scene's like more melodic side. But when I'm looking for atmosphere, it's going to be Finland or Russia. And Russia also had riffs. They really just had like one riff per song. And I could really compare this to my favorite band in the scene, Forest, but what Branacald does here is strips it all back as far as possible, and it uses the individual elements across all these albums and says, how can I use like barely switching these up per song for something truly bizarre. It's a really mystical feeling and a glacial pace to this whole thing, and what's really, really cool about it is that there's only 4 songs, they're all over 10 minutes in length, and they really only feature like one riff per. In the first song, you get a pretty typical Blazebirth Hall opening track, distorted guitar, very little bass, if any, drums doing blast beats and a fill like the whole time, which I know isn't all that proficient technically, but I think it's leads to a very repetitive hypnotic element that is necessary for good atmospheric black metal. You get vocals that are very distant, and that's kind of what you get. This sounds kind of reminiscent of a lot of other things you'd hear. If you heard it, you would disagree with that statement, but it has a similar vibe. Then what you get is I'd kind of compare the guitar tone to like later clean parts of like Immortal songs, but what it actually is like there's more reverb, the production is way more raw, and you get like a folky, jangly element. But what's really cool is like there'll still be like tremolo rest of this thing with little or no drums over it. Just a really weird, clean sound that sounds just as like dilapidated and dusty as anything else on the album. It's like finding refuge in like a withered castle. I guess weathered is a more appropriate term there. The atmosphere is like totally palpable and yet totally new. What I will say is it's not my favorite Blazebirth release. It is currently my favorite Branacald release. I've only listened to one other Branacald project as far as I can remember, but it does its job. It is absolutely fantastic. It is so hypnotic. It is one of the better atmospheric black metal albums you'll get to listen to, and that is just due to the sheer quality of Blazebirth. It's just like a Blaze Above the Ashes by Forest is just a better version of this. Like the riffs are a little better. The pacing makes a little more sense. I think it's, dare I say, a bit more approachable as well. But this album you get a lot of value out of. Just don't expect it like reinventing the wheel compared to other Blazebirth projects. And up next is a grind sort of crust punk fusion with a band called O with Il Vuoto Perfetto, which I believe is an Italian band. And you get a pretty short one, but it's melodic, disjointed, and very crusty. And while you think it's going to sound just like crust punk for a bit, it will take these riffs and double the length, quadruple the length, repeat it a couple times, give it more of that black metal grit, that a little bit more of that progression. But what's really cool is that the riffs will throw in some of those like more major chords, add a lot of that triumph for a bit more of a manic sense. It is logical and exciting, yet completely unexpected. The lead guitar and just the composition in general almost gives me like an emo violence feel, where it will switch up like logically, but like in a way that you don't expect, and also very quickly as well. It doesn't waste a lot of time. It is thrilling and emotionally draining, but it's not a disgusting black metal album by any means. It's just a very, very bitter one. So if you want your black metal to be completely like black, in the dust, depressing, this one isn't really for you. If someone calls it a little bit zoomer, I wouldn't be like completely remiss. I would be like, I kind of get it, but at the same time, the quality really shines through. But yeah, it's great. It's thrilling. It's exciting. It's a great workout album. Listen to it. And up next is Opera 9 with Call of the Woods, a very progressive Italian album that's over an hour long. And with a female singer who sings and does harsh vocals, and it suffers from a lot of sort of some of the problems that Italian black metal has been having at this time. Just like production that isn't up to snuff at the time. Like, it takes a little bit of a backseat compared to their Scandinavian contemporaries, which I know is like really rich, but it's just like it plays a little too first wave to sound like first wave. It's just kind of jarring production, but the main thing here is that it goes on a little too long, and the songs have their own problems that get fixed at other points. But there's a serious amount of variety here. There's some death metal riffs, really layered acoustic guitar, really interesting stuff. I think it just goes too long, and some of it is not executed entirely perfectly. So I think it's a good album, but the band has a better one, which would be the Black Opera. I believe the vocalist's Farewell album. Way more exciting. It trims off probably good like 10, 15 minutes of fat, and that's really all it needed. It cut out the parts that weren't the good parts and kept all the good parts in. And if you just said it was like that, that's basically how to describe it, if you're me anyway. So listen to that one instead. It's great. And up next is a Les Legions Noir demo. This is Black Murder with Feasts. Pleasant title. It is raw, simple, and insanely dissonant. It's what I'm looking for. It's not my favorite Les Legions Noir project by any means. I mean, Mutilation's like entire discography I think is better. But what you get here is more of that great, gross, grimy stuff. It's also not the weirdest Les Legions Noir release. I'd say it is a bit, dare I say, standard, but it is crunchy though. Everything sounds broken, which is a really cool production touch. The riffs go into some really interesting harmonies, which, being as layered as it is, really isn't very expected for Mutilation. Normally the density takes a step back. Like those solo Les Legions Noir projects where it's just vocals and guitar, it's like those are truly hollow stuff compared to this. It's one of those releases that you really want to embrace with a dark room. It's very twisted sounding, and you need to embrace that atmosphere. I think it is great. I love this vampiric style of black metal. It's something that I like a lot, and I just keep coming back to it. The French were kind of good at that at the time. I think the Australians are decent at it too, and so are the Finnish sometimes. And up next is a recent release. I thought I'd pick something that was good to work out to. I haven't actually worked out to this one yet, but this is Antichrist Siege Machine with Vengeance of Eternal Fire. It's 28 minutes of blasting, blazing war metal, and it's really stupid, but it will never bore you for a moment. It's no Primitive Warfare. Primitive Warfare's Extinction Protocol this year is the best war metal we've gotten in years, I'd say, and so much so I bought a patch of it. But this is a perfectly great war metal album. It is really fast, really insane, totally uninventive, but it's not what I'm here for. It's fast and crazy, and what else do you need, man? Nothing. It's great. Go listen to it. Pump some iron, dude. It's winter. We're bulking. But man, that's about that. So I'd like to give a quick thank you to Jen for the thumbnail. I'm sure they're watching this and like, we're still doing that? We're still doing that series? I know. I'm a little late, but here's part 2. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe down there amongst my social medias, as well as Jen's, as well as my own Discord page. I hope you guys have a moment to join that. Talk to me about some black metal. Talk to me about some other stuff. And, well, gosh, that's about it. Like and subscribe. Should have mentioned that too. But other than that, I hope you guys have a good day. Bye.